I love pointing out the title of this psalm. To the choir master with stringed instruments, a maskell of David, when the Zephites went and told Saul, "Is not David hiding among us?" This is a betrayal, people. This is a story, an account in the history in the life of David, where he was betrayed to Saul. These are people who knew David's whereabouts, and they were supposed to keep it a secret, but yet they betrayed him. And that's the context of this.
I mean, not only do we have a problem that penal language does not equal PSA, we also just have a textual problem in that that's not what the scripture is meaning when it says, "Judge me, O God." That's not what Hilary of Poitiers is meaning when he says, "Judge me, O God." So.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Refining Exegetics again. I'm joined by my special guest, Spencer Owen again. There's a reason, because we will again be tackling and talking about the very important issue and topic of atonement in the Bible. And this is another installment of Getting Atonement Right. And part 2 of a response to a video by Miles from the channel Canon and Creed entitled, "Does Penal Substitution Divide the Trinity?" Wherein he tries to give biblical defense or defense of penal substitution from the Bible and from early church fathers to try to defend the doctrine and the model against various objections. Some of the objections I'm not particularly concerned with, because they're sort of like the caricature of this implicates God as a divine child abuser. And I just don't go that route. So those particular objections don't really land with me. But the thing that both Spencer and I are hugely passionate about is understanding and reading the Bible correctly. But also, as an extension of that, whenever somebody goes to apologetically defend a doctrine by quote mining various church fathers to sort of lend authoritative credence and a sort of pedigree to their doctrine, that this is something that needs to be addressed and called out as much as possible. I mean, I don't know how much of a shockwave it'll send through the airwaves. To sort of undo the damage that those sort of apologetic things have done, and the theological trauma that it produces in the masses when these sort of ideas are just continually perpetrated and peddled. And so in the first installment, we worked, myself and Spencer and Joshua Sherman, who had joined us on that first episode, is not able to be here today, but we worked to wrest the biblical passages that he alludes to out of the frame of reference that Calvinism tries to impose upon them, this legal penal framework. Passages like Colossians 2:14, where it speaks of the dogma sin, the ordinances that stood against us, and the handwriting of those things, and how those things are canceled, nullified, and taken away. and uh, the Miles wants to insert this debt. There's two errors. One is to insert debt language into it, which is not in the Greek. There isn't a debt motif there. And the second one is to then translate that debt language into penal language. And so it's like a doubly erroneous move there. And so both of those need to be disentangled, unraveled, and point to the fact that no, the ordinances and the things that stood against us, it's slavery language, and it's redemptive ransom language, where the son is entering into the domain of the enemy and humiliating them, and overpowering them, so that we can be free and we could sit with
Mm-hmm.
him in the heavenlies.
Yep.
Um, as Ephesians,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
parallel in Ephesians, that idea is reiterated there, where we're sort of where he takes us from one domain and now he's sitting us with him in his domain and his authority and
Yeah.
his blessings,
Or
rather
just
than the oppression.
Colossians.
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. Or just Colossians 1. Yeah.
Yes.
Because it's right there in 13 and
Hmm.
14.
Exactly.
So,
Yep.
yep. Yep.
Yep. Translated us from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of the Son of His love.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, So that is rescue language. That is not
Mm-hmm.
there's no penal
Mm-hmm.
language going on there. And so the second part of our video was centered on situating an early church witness, which we don't know the exact author. It's just known as the Epistle of Methodist to Diognetus. Um, and he tries to highlight suffering, affliction, and judgment language that's in there. He quotes from one section and he ignores the previous three chapters and the following chapters that's situated in. Um, the whole point being of that section is that this author is apologetically describing the behavior of Christians, how when they're reviled, when they're suffering the afflictions of the enemy and the wicked, and they're in the throes of death, they operate and they act a certain way that's different from the world, because they're entrusting their souls to someone who has gone before them, who has suffered those same things and now is situated in a place where he has blessings and he can bear um, with people in their afflictions and then pour out blessings from above. And
Right.
then, as an imitation, we are called as the believers. This is the argument of the author, is that we are become imitators of God. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
we become as God to others, by
Yes.
bearing their burdens, bearing under the affliction and doing it justly and obediently, just like our forerunner did.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think the best way to shorthand that is the way that Andrew Rilera does in his book Lamb of the Free. He says Christ died ahead of us,
Hmm.
not instead of us.
Right. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason, folks, why Hebrews 12 calls him the Archon,
Mm-hmm.
Archegon,
Mm-hmm.
the forerunner, the
Mm-hmm.
pioneer, and the
Mm-hmm.
perfecter of faithfulness.
Hebrews 12 and Hebrews 6.
Yes.
Both.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yep.
So that's where we left off, was at the end of his quotations from that epistle. And what we're going to move on into, continuing, is he's going to go to the fourth century, to um a Latin source called Hilary of Poitiers, I think is
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Poitiers.
it's from
Mm-hmm.
France and the Gaul
Yep.
area.
Yep. Yep. Poitiers.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
nice pause moment there. So he's going to quote three separate sections, or from three separate sections. In what this is from Hilary's homilies on Psalm 54, and that's going to be interesting because, um, let's go ahead and let him speak, and then I'm going to go to Psalm 54 and actually read it, and so you'll get a context for what actually Hillary is commenting on, and making theological connections to Jesus from, and and you might, yeah. So we'll go from there. Here we go.
And by the 4th century, Hilary of Poitiers is already expounding Psalm 53 in explicitly penal terms. We read, "The words of the prophet therefore demand from us the recognition of his humiliation. They shew us why he, who endured all bodily sufferings, should suffer them, and why he, whose Godhead is eternal and unchangeable, should pray to be judged by God's power. For it was not for himself, whose power is invincible, but for us that he suffered, and for us that he humbled himself, becoming obedient even unto death, that he might exalt our humanity in himself to the glory of God the Father."
Oh, let me go back just so that it's not blurred out there. So just a quick note before we move on. So he highlights this phrase, should pray to be judged by God's power. So this is Hilary. The reason why he's saying this is because Psalm 54 verse 1 speaks of God's, the Hebrew word is din, judgment or decision. The Greek equivalent in the LXX here is krinon, which is the word typically in the New Testament used for judgment or decision. So just want to lay that out there briefly. Just say that again, that Hilary is commenting on Psalm 54:1 at this point. He's speaking of connection with Jesus, why David and thus Jesus would seek to pray to be judged by God's power. So, and again, it can be verified that he suffered, and for us, again, is huper, and he humbled himself, becoming obedient even unto death. So this was not for the sake of himself, but for the sake of us that he suffered.
Right.
Again,
right.
And we, from the previous episode, we elucidate that that preposition in Greek governed by a genitive of a person means that the benefit to the benefit of, because it's above. The person who's doing it for something is above, has things that can come down and benefit that person. So this isn't in place of language.
No. And are you going to talk next about the judgment aspect of things?
Well, yeah, let's do that. Let's go to Psalm 54:1.
Yeah. And so you can give the context of the scripture, and then I'll give some context from Hilary from that actual passage there. So then we can understand both how David's using judging language and also how Hilary himself is using judging language.
Yep. I'm in the wrong psalm. There we go.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Greek versus Hebrew. Yeah.
So I love pointing out the title of this psalm. To the choir master with stringed instruments, a maskil of David, when the Zephites went and told Saul, "Is not David hiding among us?" This is a betrayal, people. This is a story, an account in the history, in the life of David, where he was betrayed to Saul. These are people who knew David's whereabouts, and they were supposed to keep it a secret, but yet they betrayed him. And that's the context of this. So David is suddenly he's in the midst of this betrayal, and so he says, "Oh God, save me by your name." And well, English Standard Version has "vindicate me by your might." Now we understand, if you understand just the lexical information in regards to this verb and its associated noun, judgment, judging, rendering a decision, or the decision itself as the noun. A judgment can be for or against. A decision can be made by a judge, and that decision can be rendered for somebody, like to their credit, to their benefit, or against them. So
Right.
there again, he wants to uh use the translation
Yeah.
judgment or judging,
Yeah.
and but he forgets the fact that, and he wants to use it as that this is always a negative term.
Right. Yeah. Which basically begs the question, honestly.
It does. It's huge,
Hmm.
begging the question. But these are this is a parallelism. Save me by your name, vindicate me by your might. Those are parallel
Hmm.
statements indicating the same thing. So if we're going to say judging by your power, and Hillary is wanting to take that as a negative thing, that Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was praying that God would judge him, bring condemnation upon him. I mean, first of all, think how icky that is. Just think
Hmm.
how ridiculous that would be. Um, but then you'd have to take the parallel statement that he says that he parallels it with also as, save me by your name means kill me and judge me as a wicked person and do it instead of others. I mean, you get the picture. This is not even in the same country
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
not even the same universe of
Yeah.
what David is
Yeah.
expressing here.
Yeah. It's one thing to say, okay, David got part of it right, or like saw through a glass dimly, as Paul would say.
Mhm.
David saw a low resolution image of the reality. It's one thing to say that
Mhm.
and say that, like, Christ now shows us the 4K, high def version.
Mhm.
It's quite another to say David saw one thing and Christ saw and came to do the entire exact opposite.
Mhm.
Like that's not types and shadows, people.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
yeah,
It,
crypto Marcionism.
yes, yes, yeah, it borders on that. Um,
Yeah.
so at this point, let's read the actual section
Mm-hmm.
that he quotes from the very beginning. This section that he quotes right here is from section 10 or paragraph 10 of his
Mm-hmm.
homily. Let pure religion therefore have this confidence, and doubt not that amid the persecutions at the hand of man and the dangers to the soul, it still has God for its helper. Hence why David is crying out, save me by your name and vindicate me by your might. Knowing that if at length it comes to a violent and unjust death, the soul on leaving the tabernacle of the body finds rest with God, its upholder.
Unjust.
Unjust death.
Mm-hmm.
Unjust death.
Mm-hmm.
But Miles here
Which,
wants to paint this death as a just death, as satisfying
yes,
justice.
yes. Which sounds an awful lot like what Isaiah 53:8 says, that by oppression and a miscarriage of justice, a or by oppression his judgment was taken away, is another way that it gets translated sometimes.
Yep.
And it also sounds an awful lot like how Peter uses Isaiah 53, especially Isaiah 53:5. He was pierced for there's the huper,
Mhm.
our transgressions. Um, yeah, it sounds an awful lot like how Peter uses it too, because there he talks about unjust suffering and Jesus entrusting himself to the one who judges justly,
Mhm.
namely, as it says in Psalm 54, vindicates him.
Mhm. Yep.
Yep.
Um,
Well, even earlier though, in that same section from Hillary, in portion in the third chapter, I guess, of that, or third section portion,
mhm.
because that's when he actually quotes the
Yeah.
um yeah, save, or sorry, fourth. There you go. Yeah, save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy power. And then he goes on and talks about how it was a type of Christ again. So now here we got the types and shadows sort of thing going on. Um, but he uh makes sure that he draws in there what David says later, save me, O God. So the
Mhm.
whole judge me is tied with save me. It is very
Mhm.
much a part of that. Um, and then later on,
Yeah, and in chapter 5 is where he
yeah,
specifically
there you go.
elucidates why it says "save me by your power." Why David's saying
Bingo.
that, because it's the power of resurrection that Jesus is actually
Mm-hmm.
praying for, that David didn't have access to.
Correct.
But pointing ahead to the antitype, the fulfillment of that, Jesus is praying for God to reward him, judge him, vindicate him by your power, oh God.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, and later on there, Hillary talks about how what is the effect of judgment except for reward.
Yes.
Yeah. So for now, as the reward for his humility and emptying himself and assuming the form of a servant, in the same humility in which he had assumed it, he was asking to resume the form which he shared with God, having saved to bear the name of God that humanity in which, as God, he had obediently condescended to be born. So in Hillary's language here, and this is right after he quotes, "And judge me by your power." Hillary is using that as Jesus saying, I have given up I have emptied myself of divinity, or at least of a particular features of divinity, such that I can have condescended to become human, and now I am asking you to restore that to me, because I bore the humiliation well, because I came in the form of a servant, like Philippians 2
for
says.
a right award is the essential result of judgment or vindication. Again, in this point, judgment is the manifestation of judgment is vindication on the
bingo
in the case of Jesus, because he was obedient unto death.
There's Philippians 2. Yep. So when Miles is looking at that and saying, okay, it's talking about judgment, ergo penal substitution. I mean, not only do we have a problem that penal language does not equal PSA, we also just have a textual problem in that that's not what the scripture is meaning when it says, judge me, O God. That's not what Hilary of Poitiers is meaning when he says, judge me, O God. So.
Yep. So folks, I hope this really helps you when you come into interaction with this type of argumentation. It's you could almost expect that the source that they are quoting is actually communicating the exact opposite of what this person is saying. I mean, I wouldn't say bank on that, but it's like you have to start thinking and if you don't know the source right offhand, it's best to say, that's interesting. Let me go and see and check this, for myself.
Right.
Yeah.
I usually call that a rebuttable presumption. So like whenever someone says, hey, well, what about this church father and what they say? And look, they say he bore the penalty or he carried the punishment or whatever it is, whatever the language is. I tend to look at that and say, having read quite extensively from the patristics, I know that the way in which they use that language is totally different than the way in which the Reformation used that same language. And so I just automatically in my head have a rebuttable presumption of guilt in that case. Not because I've predetermined without a shadow of a doubt, there's none of this anywhere in here, but just because I've seen it happen so often that I just go, okay, let's take a look. I mean, we can always rebut that assumption of that it's this other kind of thing, but the burden of proof, quite frankly, is going to be on the person making the case that it is PSA, not the one that it isn't.
Right. Yeah. And again, Psalm 54. This homily is a homily on Psalm 54. So read Psalm 54 and and see if you can get penal substitution anywhere out of that. That is nowhere in Hillary's headspace, because he's not commenting on a passage that has anything to do with that.
No.
So let's go on to.
And for us, that he humbled himself, becoming obedient even unto death, that he might exalt our humanity in himself to the glory of God the Father. And then he makes this point even sharper, where he continues, for when we read that God is a righteous judge, strong and patient, can we suppose that his vengeance is a mere outburst of anger, and not the award of justice? He takes vengeance not because he is angry, but because he is righteous, And he spares, not because he is weak, but because he is patient.
Oh, I did again. Let me backtrack. He shifts too quickly. Yeah. Spencer, would it be
Yes.
safe to say that his begging the question fallacy here is that he's reading righteous judge, vengeance, and award of justice as vengeance upon the son, or vengeance
Bingo.
against sin that's being put on the son?
Yes. Yeah. Because again, we have to. This happens so often. Whenever people read through the patristics and they find these things, and they go, "Okay, it says this language, therefore it means what I think it means." But I mean, honestly, this shouldn't surprise us. We do it all the time whenever in just everyday, ordinary conversational language, like certain words mean something totally different in a different context.
Mhm.
And like, I mean, a really simplistic example is like idioms, for example, like when someone might say, "Oh, that's so cool." Like we just know because we soak in the culture and the language that cool means awesome, neat, stuff like that. It has nothing to do with the temperature of the thing. Now,
Right.
Granted, it makes good semantic grammatical sense to say, oh, well, couldn't they be talking about the temperature? Perhaps, yes, but that's not the context of the speaker. And so that's exactly what's happening here, is that when we say the word vengeance, we always have to ask on whom or what. And we have to go back to the text to see, and the context to see what exactly was the vengeance being done upon or placed upon.
Yeah.
So let's go back to Psalm 54.
This is probably, I'd imagine we're talking about vengeance. So returning upon, there's this sort of returning upon.
Mm-hmm.
And where in Psalm 54 do we have that language? Oh, verse 5. Let me zoom in here, if it'll let me.
Yep.
Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life. He will return the evil to my enemies. In your faithfulness, put an end to them. Does that sound like vengeance language to you, Spencer?
Yep, sure does. But against whom?
Yeah, against whom? Is this against the servant? Is this against David or Jesus? No. This is the appeal to God to act rightly upon those who have acted unjustly. So now that that's the language in the context, let's see what Hillary is actually saying in section 10.
But these evils are warded off is kind of where I saw it, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
But these evils, again, in the context, we're talking about persecutions at the hand of man and dangers to the soul. These are evils, are warded off from the righteous by the law of righteousness. The law of righteousness is just by way of understanding. This is an extension of God's throne, his rule. The foundation of his throne is righteousness. So therefore, when he speaks of this principle or law of righteousness, it's talking about God's going to do, will not the God of all the earth do what is right, do righteousness. So it's an appeal to that. And so these evils are turned back upon the unrighteous by the righteousness of that judgment. So this is exact opposite of what Miles is saying. Is Miles wants to say that this righteousness, or this judgment and this evil is turned upon the Son as a vicarious suffering to satisfy justice weirdness, when in fact it's God is actually turning back upon the unrighteous the evil that they were seeking to do against the righteous.
Bingo. Yeah. And as he says, each proceeding is equally just. So justice here and judgment here for Hillary is vindication of the righteous and condemnation of the unrighteous.
Mhm.
And he goes on in the last sentence there, he says, the righteous will not suffer it, meaning those the having their sins turned back against them, or having the violent and unjust death turned to against them. The righteous will not suffer it, though it is displayed to them. The wicked will never cease to suffer it because it is displayed to them. So again, like Hillary is saying, the righteous are spared this kind of punitive infliction of evil. Evil here meaning bad things happening to them. So he's explicitly not only is this not like, this is not you and I trying to be gymnastics and go, okay, how can we make this not be a PSA? In Hillary's language, he is explicitly denying PSA, because he's saying the righteous do not experience punitive affliction of condemnation.
Well said.
Period.
Bam. Yeah, that is well said. Thank you for that. Really wrapping that point up and landing it, because it just, yeah, really, this isn't explaining away Hillary. This is like, just read Hillary.
Yeah.
I said this a little bit earlier, off record, but I think I really need to say this. Miles, if you ever do watch this, I exhort you to do better than this.
Right.
Don't do stuff like this. You're being dishonest to your listeners, and you're not being beneficial to them in this apologetic move.
And I'm going to be charitable, because I think that's not only wise, it's probably more likely to be accurate, and say that, like, I doubt he's doing this out of like mustache twirling villainy and saying, okay, how can I deceive? I think it's very likely that he's just a product of exactly what I grew up in, which is, this is the water that I swam in, and the air I breathed, and I had no other way of understanding this kind of language than what I was taught. And so as a result, every time I encountered it, I immediately jumped into that semantic frame, that semantic domain. So like like we talked about with ransom and redemption language, I immediately took it from, oh yeah, we were ransomed from the wrath of God. So, okay, good to go. That's what it means. And I would just skip along, happy go lucky. And if anyone came against me and said, well, it doesn't quite mean that, I'd be like, come on, people. Like, it's the clear language of the scriptures. Like, what are you trying to do here? But the only reason it was the clear or plain language and meaning was because of just the world I was soaked in, the everything about the way that I was always taught. And so I believe Miles might be doing the exact same thing, coming from that evangelical Protestant world, that there is no other frame. And so we have to go back to actually understanding what the texts are saying in their own words and not what we think.
Good point. Yeah, well said. Let's continue on. He's going to introduce another section.
And not the award of justice. He takes vengeance not because he is angry, but because he is righteous. And he spares, not because he is weak, but because he is patient. Then a few sections later, he explicitly ties this to Christ's atoning work. It must be clearly understood that Christ was subjected to suffering of no natural necessity, but to accomplish the mystery of man's salvation, that he submitted to suffering of his own will, and not under compulsion. And although this suffering did not belong to his nature as eternal Son, yet it was freely undertaken, and was intended to fulfill a penal function. God suffered then by voluntarily submitting to suffering.
Yeah, so notice the ellipsis there. He leaves out a pretty pertinent section that sort of gives a fuller meaning to this particular sentence. I mean, he wants to highlight things like suffering, and that it was of his own will. So he's trying to go against that characterization, that objection, of God, being angry with his son, and his son was like, "No, don't do this to me. Don't do that to me. No, Father, no, Father. Not again, Father." So he's wanting to that there's that caricature out there, and he's wanting to highlight this language, like, no, he did it of his own will. It was a love agreement, and yada yada yada. I mean, I don't think that makes it any better, theologically speaking. But so that's the point of him highlighting that. But what he really wants to get at is a Latin term that gets translated as penal here, which I mean, in one sense, I mean, I've looked at the Latin there. It's a little more ambiguous than that, but uh, let's read the actual section if you're good with that.
Yeah.
Now in view. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to flag real quick for people listening that pay attention to that voluntary and not of necessity language. That is another case of where what Hillary is saying is actually contrary to PSA because there is a necessity attached to PSA. So keep that in mind as we're reading this. Anyway, go ahead.
Good point. Yeah. So section 12, now in view of our repeated, nay, our unbroken assertion, both that it was the only begotten Son of God who was uplifted on the cross, and that he was condemned to death. Again, we had to ask the question, who condemned him to death? Well, I mean, the author of Acts explicitly says over and over again that it was the people who condemned him to death.
So did the Gospels.
Yeah. Yes, so did the Gospels.
Yeah. The Greek word paradidomai is the most common language to describe what happened on the cross, and that's used for both Judas's betrayal as well as being handed over to sinful men, the Gentiles, the corrupt Judean leadership, et cetera, et cetera. So yes.
Yeah, and there's only 2 times where that verb is used specifically where God delivers over in regards. One is on Isaiah 53:6, and in the LXX it says, and the Lord delivered him up on account of our iniquities. And then there's a sort of parallel motif going on in Romans 8:32, where Paul says, who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for the sake of us all. For the sake of us all, not in place of us all, but that there would be a benefit of this. Now, this brings in Zechariah, I believe it's 9, where he says, arise, O sword, against the shepherd. So this is where God in his wisdom understands that people in their darkness, they loved darkness rather than light. And he used that opportunity where he brings forth his son into that fray, teaching his son, instructing him in wisdom and understanding, so that when the affliction comes, he responds rightly and is obedient, and even to the point of death does not revile. Even when he's condemned to death, he does not revile. And so God, in that ways, he delivers his son over to that, knowing that he's going to vindicate his son.
Yes. And furthermore, condemn the ones who condemned him. Because, which is exactly what we just got through talking about in terms of judgment in Psalm 54 and also the earlier part of Hillary, where the judgment is turned against, come back around to the people who brought the judgment in. So again, we have the corrupt Judeans, the Gentiles, all sinful men is what the shorthand the Gospels use. Sinful men are bringing the condemnation. God has paradidomai, his son over to those sinful men,
Mhm.
not so that they can satisfy his justice, but so that he can expose their injustice.
Yes.
And through that, to satisfy his justice only insofar as the son is vindicated.
Mhm.
Again, as we've been talking about with judgment. So again,
Yep.
it's a complete 180. Complete 180.
Mhm. Yeah,
Sorry.
it's just that same
I cut
language you
you off
pointed
reading.
out. No, no, it's that same language in the previous section. Each proceeding is equally just. The proceeding
Yes.
of the vindication of the servant
Yep.
through that affliction, and the proceeding of his vengeance against those who
Mm-hmm.
treated him unjustly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The picture that we should have is the parable of the wicked tenants, the vineyard.
Bingo. Yes.
Is they were given charge, stewardship over the estate, and um, he sent servants to them,
Yep.
and they mistreated the servants. He sent another servant to them. They beat them up, took his clothes or whatever, and mistreated him. And they said, well, maybe they'll listen if I send my son. They'll surely they'll listen. It's sort of the Isaiah, I surely they will
This is the
listen.
servant.
Surely my vineyard will produce fruit if I do this and do that.
Yes.
And he's
Yes.
sort of astonished. It's like, what more could I have done? He sends his son and they kill him. And then
Mm-hmm.
what is the response of the master when he returns? Is bring those people before me, and he slaughters them.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
so that's the picture that we
It
need to
is.
have.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um,
So you were reading 12.
yeah.
There. Sorry. Condemned to death is where you stopped.
Yeah. Who is eternal by virtue of the origin, which is his by the nature which he derives from the eternal Father. It must be clearly understood that he was subjected to suffering of no natural necessity, but to accomplish the mystery of man's salvation. Again, we have to understand salvation here in the midst of the Passover event, oppression and bondage.
Yes.
That's what we have to be saved from.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
And in the context of Psalm 54, the salvation means being saved from his enemies.
Exactly. Who are unjustly punishing him. And again, I'm going to bring home the point I made earlier about necessity and freedom and the way in which this had to be voluntarily submitted to. Now, a lot of PSA people will say, well, of course, like God was under no compulsion to save us. And in their system, that is true. However, well, true-ish. I mean, it raises some really interesting questions about like, okay, is God really love then? Or is he really justice, but he's somewhere tucked away in there is love? So I'll just set that aside and grant it for the sake of argument. But let's say that is true. At that point, then once Jesus comes down, though, like there is a necessity because in that system, God cannot forgive unless he has received functionally blood payment. Until something has died, a misreading of Hebrews 9:22. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness, or there is no remission. Is actually a better translation there. But anyway, the point being that there was no submitting to suffering of his own will. It's the Father's will telling him this is the only way that we can remit, that we can get them back from slavery to, I guess, my own law. And so we have to do this if we're going to save them. And so again, there is compulsion, there is necessity attached to it. Whereas the other frame that makes much more sense of both the scriptures and Hillary is just like you said in the ungrateful servant parable. The servant didn't have to go in, or sorry, the son didn't have to go to these ungrateful tenants, but he did. And once they got there, the only necessity that attached was just simply them being who they are and him being what he is. Well, of course that would happen, because he is being just and righteous, and they, like I tell my clients all the time, unhealthy systems do not welcome healthy behavior. They resist it. They push back every single time. And so it's the same sort of thing there. It's like it's a contingent necessity based on our nature, not God's nature. And that's exactly the point Hilary is making when he says, and by virtue of the origin, which is his, by the nature he derives from the eternal Father. Like that's who Christ is that spotless, unblemished, blameless human, united to the divine. So anyway.
I would much rather, when he talks about, but to accomplish, the mystery of man's salvation, I would much rather situate the if we're going to like talk about a motif or a mechanism about what that's involving, I would much rather talk about the wisdom, the depths of the wisdom and the knowledge of God that's at play here. Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. If the powers had known the wisdom of God, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. There's something within the wisdom of God that's in some respects it could be a mystery to many, and that's like a deep sea that you're meant to kind of just plunge into and get immersed in. Whereas this mechanism, where it's a penal necessity that a righteous person, the righteous Son of God, needs to undergo the penalty that we deserved in order for God to be pleased and with that and forgive us. He can't forgive sins, but somehow he's going to forgive us by punishing the sins onto somebody else. That's not the wisdom of God, people.
No,
that is not the wisdom of God. That's a distortion. That's speculative. It's weird. It's not just weird, it's unjust. But it's
explicitly repudiated by Ezekiel 18:33. yeah.
So
and
that
Proverbs
would be
27 and
or
17.
So that's a rabbit hole to go down in terms of the wisdom of God, and there's a lot to talk about there, but I just wanted to express that briefly. So continuing on, that he submitted to suffering of his own will and not under compulsion. And although this suffering did not belong to his nature as eternal Son, the mutability of God being proof against the assault of any derogatory disturbance. So what Hilary is trying to do in this section is he's trying to point out that though the eternal Son suffered, he didn't actually experience pain, which is kind of a weird way to be going, because he's trying to say that he's trying to avoid Nestorianism. I mean, in a sense, this idea that there are two persons here, and to get around this whole thing, he's trying to say that that this was without inflicting the pain of penalty upon the sufferer. It's kind of before skipping ahead, let me just.
I would add one little clarification to that. That I think the primary and there Hilary I think is doing two things. One is trying to separate between how a single subject, of Christ experiences things with two natures that seem to have contrary, ways of being. So he's trying to kind of walk that very fine line. And so I think it's and one of the ways in which he walks that, which is the other thing he's trying to do, is trying to say, just like John of Damascus and several other fathers later on talk about, is that there's a difference between like the way you and I experience pain in the way that Christ experienced pain. So when you and I experience pain, we can't help it. It is a properly spoken of as a passion, a movement of the soul and the body that moves of its own accord. It's not something that we sit there and go, I put my hand on the stove. How am I going to feel about this? It just happens to us. We are passive in the face of it. We are, and that we are made subject to it. Whereas Christ is not subject in that same way because of the union of divine and human there. And so when he experiences pain, he experiences it as a voluntary assumption of the passions. So, which to me is actually much more beautiful and gracious to say that, like, at any point, Christ, the subject, now, which is a divine human composite, according to Hilary, Christ, the subject on the cross, could have said, and they were telling him on the cross, don't feel the pain, get over it, have the angels rescue you, all those things. And those are entirely within his nature to do. But instead, he willingly chose to feel the pain of the cross. And that's why later on, when Hilary says, but because the divine nature feels no pain, he does not say Christ feels no pain. That's a very, very important Christological distinction. So,
yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I understand that. Thanks for pointing. Thanks for visiting that. Let's get to the point that he quotes the immutability of God being proof against the assault of any derogatory disturbance, yet it was freely undertaken and was intended to fulfill a penal function without, however, inflicting the pain of penalty upon the sufferer. So the ellipsis happens. The ellipsis happens right here.
Yes.
Right here. He blurps out this section right here, and then goes, God suffered then by violent. It's like, you're kind of, and maybe he just quoted what another apologist had spliced together, and he's just continuing that without having read the initial source material to get the full thought. But there's a couple of begging the questions things here going on here. One, in terms of the term penal function, again, from that period, even the word penal has a different meaning and a larger scope than what we would truncate it in our in our modern culture. That, I think, isn't it some other theologians around that time that are talking about penalty in terms of just the consequences of being mortal.
Yes. Yeah. So the way that I have often framed it is that in the church fathers, every time you see penal language, it's in the ontological framing device. So penalty there is going back to Genesis 3, and it's not an arbitrary judgment that is delivered upon Adam and Eve to say, okay, because you disobeyed me, therefore, I could do any number of things, but I choose to punish you with death. It's not that. The way that they saw it in the patristics is that it would be a penalty in the same sense that cutting my arm and bleeding out is a penalty. Like, it's just an organic, natural consequence. So if I choose not to eat food and drink water, I will die. And it's the same kind of penalty. It's just something that happens as a organic consequence of living in a world with certain conditions and restraints. God is the source of life. There's the ontological frame. To turn away from the source of life is to turn away from death, which, as many patristics are very insistent on, especially Irenaeus and the Cappadocians. God did not create death. That was man's creation. Man, of his own free will, because of his disobedience, created death. And that was part of his ability as the image of God, as a sub-creator, is to be able to bring forth things into the world that were not. And we just chose to bring about our own death.
Yeah. So the paradigm that's going on here is within this theologian and those of that time, and especially carried on into the Cappadocian fathers, is this is an incarnational ontological reality for the Son as a member of the human race to go through, not and it's in that sense that it's like undergoing the penalty of being a human. Is on this in this ontological level. It is destined for man to die once and afterwards face judgment. So
and that is why
that's the penal function. If we're to use that language again, I'm not a Latin. I don't care much for the Latin tradition, and I don't care to even just because even if they mean that sort of paradigm by using penal language, I don't use it because it's not really the language of the Bible. But I get the paradigm, and I hope people listening, both to you, especially elucidating this, and me sort of just kind of giving communicating my understanding of this is when you say ontological reality or on the ontological level, this is something that what it means to be a man is to go through this. And so therefore the eternal Son goes through this and voluntarily takes it upon himself as a member of the human race, participating with us so that he can then on the flip side of that elevate us with him on the other side of that.
Correct. Now I will go ahead and use scriptural language then, which is what the patristic authors very frequently will combine together 2 Corinthians 5:21, Galatians 3:13, and Romans 8:3, as well as Philippians 2:7. They will frequently quote them all in as one single unit, all saying the same thing. So we have became a curse, became sin, came in the likeness of sinful flesh, and came in the form of a slave, and in the likeness of anthropos. So all of those things, that whole cluster of scriptural language, according to the patristics, is saying the same thing: incarnation, that the divine word took on flesh and became human. And that's exactly what the penalty is. Now, the penalty there is enduring all of the vicissitudes of mortal life, and this is how the book of Hebrews talks about his obedience in suffering. It says in the days of his flesh, and that he offered up, loud pleadings and cries, and he was heard because of his righteousness. So again, this is not like Jesus saying, God, please spare me, and God saying, nope, I got to kill you. It's because that's not what Hebrews says. He's saying, God, this suffering in a mortal body is difficult. It's weighing on me. I don't want to necessarily, because I know what it feels like to not have to deal with this. And God is saying, be patient, my son. I will uphold you. Again, just like Psalm 54 says, he will be the upholder of my life. So it's like, yes, he will be. So anyway.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. So this is decidedly not penal substitution language, It's not penal in the sense that Miles wants it to be, because this is not satisfying a. This isn't. We're not talking about the law of Moses, the stuff like that here. Not penal in that sense. The author Hillary here is using this word in a completely different paradigm. That's more along the lines of an ontological reality rather than a truncated like mere like penal thing that we think of. And it's not substitution either.
No. Yeah, because, and this is one of the things that I always feel, every time I talk with somebody who affirms PSA, I always want to ask them two questions primarily, and I'll just focus on the one right now. The one is, what is it exactly that Christ underwent that we no longer have to? That what was it that he spared us from? And it's really hard to get a straight answer, or at least it's hard to get a straight answer that doesn't slide into a two-subject Christology or Nestorianism, which most of the people who affirm PSA would want to avoid.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So the next section that he gets into, this is the section where some of Hillary's thoughts specifically on verse 6 of Psalm 54 with a free will offering, in light of the fact that David has this hope that God will vindicate him and will return this injustice that's been perpetrated upon him. He would return that vengefully upon those who have mistreated him. There's the reorientation phase of the psalm. There's disorientation and reorientation. David has experienced the disorientation. Now he's recentering, and now he's reorienting. I have hope. I trust in God, who is my helper. Therefore, with a free will offering, I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies. So he specifically uses the free will, the expression free will offering. And that is an actual offering in the Levitical system. There's Thanksgiving offering and free will offerings and stuff like that. And therefore a specific reason. There's to give thanks. Offer to God an expression of gratitude, of thankfulness, but also just because, like, you're worth it, Lord.
Yes,
I'm devoted to you.
I will point out a voluntary offering. Like,
yes.
It is not and also I will point out non-atoning. It falls in the category of the shalomim, or the peace offering, or the goodwill offering, and which can be made with either animals or grain, either one. They can both be. So again, it doesn't require death. It is never stated to have an atoning function. And this is, again, here we go, penal substitutionary atonement. So the idea there, it makes absolutely, well, okay. It shows that the people who say, oh, look, sacrifice equals vicarious death equals atonement. Frankly, with respect, they have not read the Bible closely. They haven't, because that is not the function of the offering being referenced. That is not how even the atoning offerings worked. There's nothing in the Bible that demonstrates a sacrificial offering that is a death in place of someone bringing the offering.
Correct.
And certainly not this one.
And the reason, Spencer, the reason why I started off with reading verse 6 here, as opposed to hearing Hillary's thoughts and then correlating with verse 6, is because at this point, this is actually where I disagree with Hillary's homily.
Okay. I would love to hear your explanation here.
Because he actually takes it completely out of the vein of a free will offering and turns it into the atonement language.
Yeah.
Because it's about Christ now. Now this is where he departs from the and let me see if you get the same sense.
Okay.
For the next there follows, I will sacrifice unto you freely. The sacrifices of the law, which consisted of whole burnt offerings and oblations of goats and of bulls, did not involve an expression of free will.
I'm sorry, he missed it. Nope.
I'm like, wait a second. You just said, I will sacrifice unto you freely, but now he's taking it in a different direction. But let's continue on and see where he goes with this. Because the sentence of a curse was pronounced on all who broke the law.
Okay. So, no. Okay. So go back to Leviticus 26. Leviticus 26 is the curse of the law. It is the description of what happens when people break the covenant, when there's a core, deep covenant breach that requires the curse to fall. And that curse is exile, being handed over, paradidomai, to the pagan nations, and to basically for God to say, you've been worshiping those other gods. Okay, fine. Have it your way. Worship them, commune with them, be a part of their world, and I will let the pagan world take you away and you will get what you want. And I don't think you'll like it, but it seems to be what you want. And so that's the curse of the law, that kind of exile. And then in Leviticus 26:31, I believe it is, he explicitly says, when that happens, I will not smell your offerings. So sacrifices, and this is something that Andrew Rillera, who I mentioned earlier, says in Lamb of the Free, sacrifices do not solve covenant breach. They are worthless, which is what Isaiah 1 and Micah 4 or Micah 6 and Amos 4 and all the other passages say is stop giving sacrifices. They're an abomination to me because the covenant has already been broken. And the solution there is not let's sacrifice to fix the covenant curse. It's the covenant curse has fallen. Sacrifices don't work anymore.
Yeah.
What is needed is the mercy and grace of God to end wrath, not because he got paid, but because he decided enough is enough, to end wrath and to turn again upon us with favor.
Usually that requires an intercessor.
Yes.
I mean, not requires, but I'm not to say that it requires. It's like, but in that sense, God looks for an intercessor.
Yeah. Usually it is mediated through an intercessor, which is Hebrew's language all over.
And it's Moses' language too, who went up to intercede on behalf of Israel. So it's
I'm with
you. Are you tracking with? I mean, it sounds like he just completely left the stadium of Psalm 54 to make a certain theological connection inferentially.
I'm with you.
And I just like, why did you do that? and probably because, I mean, again, he's probably not a Jew.
No, he's not.
I mean, he definitely wasn't a Jew and not immersed in that frame of reference. So he mischaracterized the entire offering system there, and the purpose of it. So if we go back,
I agree.
And so if there's anything strength wise to Miles quote mining here, I mean, it would be this section 13, because it seems like the language and the sort of place he goes off into seems to me, it's like, come back, Hillary. Come back to the Bible.
But I'm still going to highlight, even within, let's just assume Hillary is, well, I'm not going to say assuming is correct, but let's work within that framing.
Okay,
He still highlights he still highlights the voluntary nature of it. And so the way that Hillary is saying is that, again, I'm going to step into his mind. The sacrifices of the law were not voluntary. They had to happen, or else there would be a curse. But what Hillary is saying is contrasting that with Christ and saying he was the voluntary offering. He did not have to do that. And so what he did was he stepped into the space of mandatory curse and stuff like that, and mandatory sacrifices, and did the whole thing voluntarily, not so that it could satisfy the curse. That was not the point. The whole point was to be able to say, I'm going to do this unjustly. I'm not subject to the curse. I'm not under the curse. I am not accursed, but I will still offer the sacrifice that will be pleasing, not because it is required, but because I love you.
Right.
So
yeah.
Again, stepping into Hillary's world.
Yeah. So and I think it's important. Maybe we'll read the rest of this short section. Whoever failed to sacrifice laid himself open to the curse. Again, I don't agree that that's the right framing, but again, he's just framing this in terms of how he understands that the sacrifices were an obligatory requirement and not a free will thing. And it was always necessary to go through the whole sacrificial action because the addition of a curse to the commandment forbade any trifling with the obligation of offering. It was from this curse that our Lord Jesus Christ redeemed us, when, as the apostle says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by being made curse for us. For it is written, curses everyone that hangs on a tree, Galatians 3:13. Thus he offered himself to the death of the accursed, that he might break the curse of the law, offering himself voluntarily a victim to God the Father, in order that by means of a voluntary victim, the curse which attended the discontinuance of the regular victim might be removed. In other words, there are people who discontinued the process, the whole sacrificial action. They discontinued it, and therefore they're under that curse that comes upon people who discontinue that. And so Jesus was under no necessary compulsion to complete that sacrificial action, but he did it voluntarily, and in so doing, obediently, he removes the curse from that attends the discontinuance. Right. Now, of the sacrifice mention is made in another passage of the Psalms: sacrifice and offering you would not, but a body you have you prepared for me. That is, by offering to God the Father, who refused the legal sacrifices, the acceptable offering of the body which he received, of which offering the holy apostle thus speaks, for this he did once for all when he offered himself up, Hebrews 7:27, securing complete salvation for the human race by the offering of this holy, perfect victim. There's one sense in which this gets right, is that the obedience that the Lord looked for all along was obedience, was out of a right heart, and of which the sacrifices were simply to be an outward expression of that inward heart posture. If you didn't have the inward heart posture, the sacrifices were not accepted, and in fact he hated and loathed them, when in fact while at the same time they were a regulation in the law of Moses. But they had a specific place and a function, and so Jesus is voluntarily taking upon himself the not only the inward heart posture, but the fullest expression of that outward reality, by offering himself as a victim to God. I think the specific language of victim only comes up in the Latin theologians. I mean, is that I think I remember asking you or Joshua if that was ever
Mhm.
like prevalent in the Cappadocian fathers of depicting it as the
No,
victim.
no. Victim there just means sacrificial offering.
Right.
He's tying him to being a sacrifice. Um, but that's a again, here's another one of those semantic frames and
Right. I don't
time
like the word
difference being
personally, but
I, I don't either. But again, like victim in that world did not mean the one who is killed in place of,
right. Yeah.
the one who receives the punishment of. It was just a way of referring to the sacrifice.
Hmm.
It it carried no freight apart from that.
Hmm.
So now we think of it as being like, God was punishing his son, and in that sense he was a victim, but that's not how the language worked back
Hmm.
then.
Yep.
So
Um, as we get back into the video, we try to finish some things out.
yeah.
This is the end. He summarizes all of the three sections that he quotes from as point by point, point out this is penal and this is substitution and this is atonement. It's therefore PSA. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so he does that spiel. I think as we've sort of we don't need to go through that section because I it's not necessary. The next witness, quote unquote, that he brings up is Pope Gregory the First. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't think I want to spend much time on that.
No,
Um,
I I did want to see if maybe, and I forget if Miles gets into this, but like the very end of Hillary actually speaks again against PSA, and again, and in the same vein that we've been talking about.
you're talking about at the end of
For the
14
only
here.
begotten, for the only begotten Son of God was not cut off by death.
Let me see if I can where so I can highlight it. Where is that at? Or is that in 13 or is it in 14?
14. It's um my eye has looked down upon my enemies in italics, and then right after that, right there, one line down, two lines down, right there.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Yeah.
So, for the only begotten Son of God was not cut off by death. There again, we have that purpose that cut off is cursed language
Hmm.
um is so what Hillary is trying to say. And again, I am with you. I take issue about the precise mechanics of
Hmm.
how he envisions that, but I can still agree with the conclusion and just disagree with how he gets to that conclusion.
Hmm.
Um, but the point here is that he assumed the state of being a human, which is
Hmm.
that cur- he became a curse, became sin, likeness of sinful flesh, all those things. He became a curse, but was not accursed, but was not accursed, and that's where we get that not cut off by death. So what he's saying is he underwent death as part of this, like, Adamic surrender to mortality,
Hmm.
but in so doing he was not accursed, he was not cut off. And then he goes on to say, it is true that in order to take the whole of our nature, again such as it was in Adam, upon him he submitted to death. So when people ask me, like, okay, well, if we have PSA, or sorry, if we get rid of PSA, why did Jesus have to die?
Hmm.
There's the answer: because we're mortal. He
Hmm.
had to enter into the state of death so that he could then redeem. There's the redemption, salvation, rescue language, that prison of Sheol,
Hmm.
so that we would not be bound by it any longer. And again, here's the he died ahead of us thing. We still die.
Mm-hmm.
We still go into that state of nature. But because of what Christ has done as our forerunner, we go into that state of nature in a whole different way. It no longer becomes condemnation for us, it becomes vindication for
Mm-hmm.
all those who are in Christ Jesus. So
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and so that really rounds out the end of the psalm. For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies. And so that's
bingo.
where he ends at. His
Yep.
homily is this picture of the exalted Son sitting on his throne, now looking down and surveying the people, the very people who sought after
Yep.
him, the very people who
Yep.
wrought his death. And
Yep.
he's waiting for those enemies to made his footstool.
Yep.
Um,
Here's a fun thing to do sometime, because people always look at like, oh my God, why have you forsaken me on the cross? And they want to, claim that as PSA.
mm,
Read Psalm 22 with the cross in mind. Then read Psalm 23 with the journey into Sheol, with the harrowing of
mm,
Hades in
mm,
mind, being in the grave.
mm-hmm,
And then read Psalm 24, Arise, O God,
mm-hmm,
as with the resurrection and ascension in
mm-hmm,
mind.
yeah.
And that totally changes the dynamic of the way that the scriptural authors saw the kind of messianic, because Psalm 22 was messianic,
Mm-hmm,
saw that whole narrative of the Messiah as being one who suffered unjustly, who it appeared by all appearances God had abandoned him, but actually, as Psalm 22 ends, he has not hidden his face.
mm-hmm,
um, and then he goes through the valley of the shadow of death in Psalm 23. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Again, not abandoned. There's Hillary again.
mm-hmm.
He was not cut off by death. um, and then going into the vindication of Psalm 24. Open your gates that the King of Glory may come in.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Just by way of wrapping this part up, and I think we'll address one more section of the video before we close out.
sure.
I want to encourage us all um, to think about, in comparison to what I hope is evident through these two videos and addressing this video and some of the and other content that I have on my channel. And certainly some of those who are familiar with your work, Spencer, would understand
Mm-hmm.
that this language that and this framing that is inherent to penal substitution uh, is something that co-ops particular words and does an association fallacy to rip those words um, out of context and put them into a different narrative that doesn't belong, that is foreign to the
Mm-hmm.
scriptures, and it actually obscures the language. Um,
Yep.
I would suggest, in contrast to that, there are clear things that the apostles say over and over and over again to give us signposts to see exactly how the primary way that they frame the death, that event of the cross of Jesus. It comes up in places like Acts 4 when they're praying, when they say, Sovereign Lord, you made the heaven and the earth and the sea and everything in them, who through the mouth of our father David, your servant, said by the Holy Spirit, why did the nations, the Gentiles, rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers were gathered together against the Lord and against his anointed. For truly in
Yep.
this city there were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles and the peoples of Israel, to do whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place. And now, Lord, look upon their threats and grant to your servants to continue to speak your word with all boldness. The reason why I bring this up is this is the primary framing of the death of Jesus as an event. What happened on the cross is, where did they go? They go to Psalm 2.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly you could go to places like Psalm 22 and things like that, Psalm 8. Um, the, these are clear signposts that help ground our understanding of the cross event in an apostolic, grounding it apostolically. They go to
Yep.
Psalm 2 and talk about the nations raging against God and against his anointed. And they only quote part of it, but we understand we should read all of Psalm 2, where God's response is he laughs and holds them in derision, saying, I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. The very act perpetrated against them is the means by which God overturns their plots, their plans, and installs his king as ruler. And
Yeah.
that's very clear. He had to go through suffering, just like Peter says, we must through many trials go through to enter into glory. Again, that's
Mm-hmm.
he entered ahead of us, not instead of us. He paved the way,
Mm-hmm.
so it's
Mm-hmm.
that's why they say, now give us
Yep.
boldness, Lord, to speak boldly, and look
Yeah.
upon their threats. And when they, knowing that if we commit our hands, our lives and our souls to the shepherd and overseer, he will vindicate and he will pay vengeance upon our enemies.
Absolutely. I like that term of that language you used of, he paved the way.
Mm,
Because that A is very Isaiah language of
mhm.
of the forerunner, of the one crying in the wilderness, make
Yeah.
straight the paths for our God,
Mm,
and those kind of things. So Jesus, as that forerunner, is the one who is going into the human condition.
mhm,
Again, that language of curse, made sin, likeness of sinful flesh, penalty, all those things. That space is a rocky, jumbled, untraversable mess,
mhm,
just overgrown, and like we on our own strength cannot navigate that path at all,
mhm,
because of our limitations as being weak in the flesh, like Paul talks about in Romans 8. Because of all those things, Christ knows that. He goes into that place of our weakness and suffuses it with his divine life.
mhm,
And that is what allows him to have the power to be able to flatten and level out that path, to pave that
mhm,
way, so that for us as humans now, whenever we want to know what is the path to God, what is the way to the life of the age to come, that path is no longer rocky and overgrown and tumbled up. It's paved and flat and smooth and straight.
mhm.
And that is because Jesus died ahead of us,
Yeah.
not instead of us.
Mhm. Amen. Good. Let's so again, I'm not going to worry much about his quotations from Gregory, from Pope Gregory. I mean, that's 7th century. Um
Yeah,
it's late
me
in the
either.
game. He wants to make the case that it's before Anselm. Fine. Still, 7th century is way too late. To
Yeah.
you've got 7 centuries of theologizing and philosophizing and inferences and things going on, uh
Mm-hmm.
uh to to um to where you're I mean, honestly, the things that he quotes from there, the things that Gregory says in regards to this are things that I find almost, I mean, I almost find no connection with the scriptures themselves. I mean, I think there's quotations of the scriptures, but I don't want to say much in that regard. This isn't a like me running from that or saying, oh, yeah, maybe it is there. I don't have an argument. I guess I don't care enough. In regards to that, other people can deal with that, I guess. The next section
I personally don't have too much interest in defending the Latin tradition either.
Yeah,
so
like that's sort of it. That's sort of it.
I'm with you.
It's the Latin tradition.
Yeah.
This section he goes into quoting John Calvin and scholars in relation to John Calvin's theology. I'm trying to think if I wonder if we just should go to the unjust section and address that.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Let's see what he's got to say here.
Because I also have little interest in validating Calvin. So.
Yeah. I don't even want to listen to it.
Or vindicating, I should say.
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
And the third and final objection we'll look at is a philosophical one. People will say penal substitution turns God into an unjust judge, punishing the innocent while letting the guilty walk free. And on the surface, this sounds compelling, until you realize that it misrepresents what the doctrine is positing. Because again, this objection detaches the belief from the framework in which it exists. Scripture does not present Christ as a random third party dragged in against his will. As I already said, he is the covenant head, the second Adam, who willingly takes responsibility for his people. Romans 5 sets the pattern, as in Adam all die, so in Christ all are made alive. Then 2 Corinthians 5:21, for our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And Isaiah 53, it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief. The Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
Yeah, I can see visible frustration.
Yep.
Frustration
and intensifies.
So we don't need, Spencer and I don't need to go along with the particular objection of the objection being that this is characterized as an unwilling third party who's just being subjected to this against their will.
No.
That's not an objection that we care at all to. It doesn't land with us. But what does land with us is he gives a spattering of a few verses, quoting them briefly and then filling them full of theological ideas and philosophical ideas that aren't present there. That's what I'm passionate about. It's like, no.
Yeah.
This is not the framework of PSA. That these are passages in scripture that have their own frame.
Yes, they have their own frame, and it began with Augustine and blurred into Anselm and Aquinas and then on into the Reformation. So I'm going to highlight the Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 15
Sure.
one, because Augustine began this problem of what we call like a nature person confusion, in that what Augustine did was his doctrine of original sin postulated that every single human person is responsible for the sin of Adam, is culpable, is guilty before God. And that's one of the reasons why he advocated for infant baptism and a few other, and talked about there being limbo for unbaptized infants and all that stuff. So all that to say, when we look at the scripture and we say in Adam all die, now if we say all and we mean all human persons, and then we say in Christ all human persons are made alive. Oops. This is the reason why I know. I know. It's like, wait, whoa, back up. Because Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 15 are talking about human nature, which is why 1 Corinthians 15 talks about the qualities of human nature, that it is corruptible, that it is subject to decay, that it is going to pass away, perishable, all those things. And then it says that it's going to be changed. And the reason why it is going to be changed is because Christ is the first fruits, there's the forerunner language of that change. So the framework he's using is not biblical, because it's not saying that in Romans 5, every single individual human person is subject to a guilty penalty of death. That is what Augustine said, but that is not what Paul is saying.
Yeah, let's make it very. Go ahead.
Right, go ahead. Well, it's saying that in Adam, because of Adam, all human nature is subject to mortality and death. And that is exactly how Romans 5 and 6 go, is it talks about the reign of death, the rule of death, all that dominion and language over and over and over again. And so because that's the framework that Romans 5 is using.
Yeah, so the framework, let's make this clear. The framework of penal substitution is not Romans 5, 1 Corinthians 15, 2 Corinthians 5:21, Isaiah 53. The framework of PSA is Augustinian anthropology.
Yep.
And then the legal framework of John Calvin.
Yes.
Yes. Extrapolated on to or built upon the Augustinian anthropology.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
And then because of that framework, it's a lens. Now we're going to look for proof texts that support this apologetically.
Yes.
That is the framework of penal substitution. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I find it so odd, and I don't think he actually addresses the objection later on, so you'll have to tell me but my recollection is no. 2 Corinthians 5:21, I've already talked about how that is paired up frequently with this incarnational language of becoming flesh. But let's take him at his word. For our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin. So the title of his video is, Does Penal Substitution Divide the Trinity? How can Christ be made sin in that guilty, forensic, Augustinian way of Romans 5? How does that happen without dividing the Trinity? I cannot see any way out of that.
Yeah, because a human nature can't be made sin. And
bingo.
An impersonal nature can't be made sin or righteous or justified. God doesn't justify natures or curse natures. It's bingo.
Not in the legal sense.
Right.
He does justify in terms of make right in the ontological sense by healing human nature, at least according to the way I read those passages. But again, that quality of human nature has to be lived out by every single individual person in order to happen. So think of it this way, like human nature has the capacity to play the piano. It's a natural capacity of us. It is false that every single human person, because of that fact, is a piano player. We each have to individually sit down, do the work, learn the stuff, and become a piano player to make real in our person and our hypostasis that natural quality. The same thing is true of everything that Paul is saying here, that all human nature has been vivified, which is patristic language, has been brought to life. But every single human person has to bring that to life. Just like every single human person is subject to death because of Adam. Sorry, every single human, or all human nature, is subject to death because of Adam. And every single human person is guilty for their own sin. They have to make that real in their person.
Yep.
And that's where the condemnation comes in, not because of Adam.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just a quick note, Isaiah 53, these two lines that he rips right out of there. I refer people to the two-part episodes titled "It Pleased the Lord to Crush Penal Substitution," parts 1 and 2. Look for those episodes on my channel. They go in detail in Isaiah 53, verse 10, this line, where I contend and argue that it is the will of the Lord to make him humble, to make him contrite. He has put him to grief. That's what the Hebrew verb dakah means in that context. And then verse 6, which he quotes out of line here, the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to strike him. That's essentially what the LXX is getting at when it says he delivered him up on account of our sins, or delivered him over on account of our sins. Is he allowed the...
I forget.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. Continue. You may answer my question.
Yeah. So the that's essentially what that's saying is the verb paga laid on him is a hyphal verb. It's causative. It means the Lord has made to strike him the iniquity of us all, is literally what it says in the Hebrew. You could take it, you could take the verb. Go ahead.
I was going to say that pairs well with Isaiah 53:5, that he was pierced from. Thank you. I had to get my ESV out of my head.
Don't we all?
He was pierced from, the source of the piercing was our iniquities. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the Lord allowed that to happen, certainly because he had a redemptive plan to bring forth through that.
Correct.
That
he allowed it to happen, even though it was explicitly a injustice for it to happen. He did not allow it to happen as a satisfaction of his justice. So, and that's why it pleased the Lord, because it pleased him to display to the whole world, look, this guy is innocent in every conceivable way, and look how you treat him. So that is on you. That is your condemnation, and I will raise him as a vindication of him. And that's why it pleased him.
Yeah, and that's what shocks the people. That's what shocks the speakers of Isaiah 53 out of their malaise, their disobedience. Yeah,
and frankly, their improper view of God. Because they start off saying, at the very beginning of Isaiah 53 says, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord, which is salvation language, by the way, been revealed. And we accounted him of no esteem. In fact, we esteemed him smitten by God, crushed by him, and afflicted. We thought he was being cursed by God. And then, of course, the passage goes on to say it was by oppression and judgment, and a lack of judgment, he was taken away. And now we see what actually pleases the Lord, to hand him over to that so that he can make many righteous. And
that line, the Lord has made the iniquity of us all to strike him, or made to strike him the iniquity of us all, goes right hand in hand with the previous line that says, stricken from the transgressions of the people. He was stricken from the transgressions. So the transgression struck him. It's literally what is going on.
Did you cover in your Isaiah 53:1? Did you cover about the language of bearing iniquity?
Um, let's see. Have I covered that in specifically in any of my videos? You're talking about like verse 11. He bore the iniquities of many
Yeah. Yeah.
and made an
Because
intercession for the transgressors. Um,
yeah.
no, I mean, no, not in content form on my channel. I mean, I've discussed it at length just in terms of the verb
Okay.
nasa, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and its valence
Mm-hmm.
within
Mm-hmm.
the Levitical
Mm-hmm.
system.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So again, um,
That's
it's a function that a sanctified individual is set
mm-hmm.
apart and purified and is in a heightened state to be able to provide is the removing
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
iniquities.
Which is exactly what you in the Acts passage that you pulled up. There's that anointed.
Hmm.
It's that Mashiach,
Yeah.
an anointing language, which is not just a Jesus thing; it's a priestly
Yeah.
role.
Hmm.
The priests were anointed as Mashiach,
Hmm.
and the priests were also the same ones who bore iniquity,
Hmm.
the ones who carried the weight that was caused by the the sins and transgressions of the people.
Hmm.
Because they were in that special place, they had the ability and the purity to be able to handle it safely, so to speak.
Hmm.
Think of it almost kind of like radioactive waste. Like the iniquities of the people are the radioactive waste, and
Yeah.
the servant and or as a priest, as a priestly anointed figure, is able to handle the radioactive waste
Hmm.
because he has the right protocols,
Yeah.
hazmat suit, whatever you want to think of it.
Yeah.
And because he's able to handle it, he's able to dispose of it, to send it far away from us, just like
Hmm.
the other bearer of iniquity, the
Hmm.
goat for Azazel. So,
Yeah. An analogy I like to make is what is Frodo called in the Fellowship of the Ring? What's he called? What's the title given to
boom,
him?
love
The
it. Ring
Ring
bearer.
Bearer. Because Frodo is lifting up something that is afflicting afflicting the world, afflicting Middle Earth, and it is the source of chaos. And he's bearing it upon himself and becoming the target of all that affliction. And he bears
Mm.
it obediently into the very domain of the enemy to destroy it.
You
That's
have
the
just
Isaiah
found
suffering servant.
you have just explicated my new favorite way of explaining this. I thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love it.
Yeah. Um, so honestly, I think I probably want to wrap that up there.
Yes.
Um, um, yeah. Because I think the framework, people, is not the Bible.
Mhm.
You have something else going on there. Like Augustinian anthropology, you've got a bit of um the the cultural and philosophical milieu of the Middle Ages,
Mhm.
that then kind of thickened and coalesced into the penal categories of Calvin, who is a lawyer, and um,
Yep.
you, there is absolutely no connection to the Bible with that, and it's a lens that needs to be stripped away.
Yep. And just to reiterate and prove that point, Proverbs 17:15. He who justifies the wicked
Mhm.
and he who condemns the righteous are both alike an abomination to the Lord.
Mhm.
So this whole section of this video isn't that a injustice that the innocent are punished instead of the guilty?
Mhm.
Yes, God says so right there in Proverbs.
Yeah. Um, and uh, characters aside, you would never have a just legal system whereby the judge or somebody who is identified with the judge steps
Yeah.
down or steps in and says, I will take the sentence in place of the criminal. And
Right.
then in no justice system that we can even conceive of would that be considered a handling of justice. That would
Right.
actually be a breaking of justice. I mean,
Absolutely.
for many reasons, but most poignantly is this is the PSA is supposed to solve a problem. Like it's supposed to be a solution to a problem. But the problem is it doesn't fix the individual.
No,
It
exactly.
fixes something that's out there in the ether that's over the individual's head that doesn't involve the individual. You have no
Right.
transformation. The mechanism, if there is anything at all, is just a legal fiction, a farce
Right.
that doesn't
hmm
affect the individual
hmm
in terms
hmm
of the issue that caused the iniquity in the first place.
Right. Where
Um,
God is judge just crosses his fingers and hopes
mhm,
that the boundlessness of his mercy in sparing this wicked person will convince them of the error of their ways and
mhm,
will help them to turn away. But the act itself does nothing real, which
mhm,
is one of the reasons why Luther, one of the primary Reformation figures who espoused this, called us snow-covered dung. That we remain heaps of dung
mhm,
in God's eyes. But He puts a layer of snow over top of us, such that when He looks at us, all He sees is the snow, which is
mhm,
a weird, like, that's why when you say legal fiction, this is not caricature.
mhm,
It really, really is. Like I've actually coined a term for like where it's that God has to put on His sun glasses, SON, to be able to see us correctly,
right. Yep.
to be able to see us well without killing us, because otherwise he would be so disgusted. Like
Mhm,
this is why this is real and important, because like my podcast is about working with people who have experienced spiritual trauma and hurt from the church because of toxic theologies and abusive systems and stuff like that. This is one of those things. When PSA creates a view of God that cannot forgive sins, that
mhm,
has to be paid in blood and death for as a punishment,
mhm,
that is unable to see people as loving, lovable, as anything like that,
mhm,
unless he does a sleight of hand over top of them that makes it look as if they are good.
mhm.
That is a view of the Father that is A, blasphemous. I'll just say it. B,
Yeah.
causes serious damage. And I say that as someone who has had to unpack my own.
Mhm,
And I have had serious difficulty attaching to God because of that. And it even affects my own parenting. My friend Phil Bray who's written a book on Leviticus, has done a short video that I would recommend everybody to look at, where he talks about how be holy as I am holy has led him in this view, has led him to become a very angry dad.
mhm,
And that is exactly the struggle I have faced myself. And I still struggle with, even though I've kind of got it up here, it hasn't sunk down. So
mhm,
that's a personal story that is
mhm,
one of thousands that I have heard about how this view of God and his love, quote unquote, is what it it twists our heart and our mind,
mhm.
and we have to let it go because it's not in the Bible.
Amen. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks for wrapping things up with that. Super important. Um, yeah. So again, thank you for joining me again, Spencer. And those of you, many of you in this channel are probably already familiar with Spencer and his content and his channel. But again, check out his channel, The Trauma Informed Church Kid, his podcast, and it's on. You're on Spotify as well as YouTube and
and all the major platforms.
All the major
yep.
podcast venues there. So yeah. I still hoping to one day soon do a deep dive into Isaiah 53 line by line with you, Spencer, and bring in all the.
I would love that.
Bring in all the things.
Yes. Love that.
Well, bless you, Spencer. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Shalom to you.
Thank you.
Shalom to all of you out there. Bless you. Hey folks, if you enjoyed this episode and the content, please like the video and leave a comment below, and definitely subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can be sure to catch more content like this as it comes. Until next time, think deep.